Well, welcome to week number 8. You've just about made it through the course. Just a quick reminder that if you've not turned in the summary paper already, that needs to be done. And the reflection paper is due as well in the next couple of days. So I hope you will get those in. So those can be graded. Again, if you continue to have questions and want to discuss things privately, please feel free to email me. I hope that this course has been beneficial for you, whether you're a pastor or church leader wanting to engage the church on mission, or whether you are sensing a call to mission, serving in missions, and are looking to just seek more training. We come to the last chapter. Chapter 13, the 21st century practice of global missions. What do things look like today? What are things going to look like pushing through this next century? I want to go through a couple things the authors have pointed out, and then get on a personal, talk about urbanization some, and personal reflection, personal belief on what some things will look like moving into as we move through the 21st century. So first of all, the changing global conditions. The world changes every day, continues to change, but here's some general statements the authors have made. Number one, the growing secularization of the West. And Western countries, whether it's Europe or North America, are growing more and more secular. And so, number one, this makes the West a renewed mission field. We need to be on mission in the West, on mission in North America, revitalizing, replanting, planting new churches. But it also affects our missions as well, because as the Eastern world looks at the West and they see us growing more secular, it can hinder our mission efforts, and here's why. The many people of the world, whether it's Muslims, for example, or even dictators, they will point to the West and say, the West is Christian. To be American is to be a Christian. And look at how secular Americans are becoming. So see, Christianity is secular. One of the worst witnesses for Christianity around the world is the movies that come out of Hollywood. Well, you say, well, Hollywood's not trying to witness around the world. No, they're not, per se. But because America is equated with Christianity, and Hollywood and all these movies are made in America, out of America, that is actually a reflection of Christianity to the people of the world. And so growing secularization of the West becomes a hindrance to our mission efforts. We have to overcome their own baggage, the new culture's baggage of what they believe about America, before we can share Christ. It's just the way it is. The resurgence of world religions. The world religions are surging, and you know this in the West, that Islam and some of the Eastern religions, Hinduism or parts of Hinduism, Buddhism, New Age movement are coming out of that. And so it infiltrates America, it infiltrates the American worldview, but also that of others. The world religions are becoming more global themselves. Hinduism becoming more global, Buddhism becoming more global. And a lot of this happens because of globalization, which we'll mention in just a moment. So we have to take that into account. Missionary access to the most unreached. Some of the most unreached people in the world remain unreached because they are difficult to get to. The remaining unreached people groups of the world are some of the most difficult for us to get to. Some of them we can't even get to as Caucasian Americans. And so we have to find how are we going to reach those people. Governments in the past, many governments would allow missionaries into the country. Fewer and fewer countries allow missionaries into their countries now to work as missionaries, and that hinders our access. However, technology increases our access. Internet access to some of the most unreached parts of the world. So we need to take advantage of those. But all of these things play a part in the changing global conditions of this current century. I believe that 21st century missions must move to the cities of the world. For too long, though we might have had presence in cities, we have not had focused strategy on reaching cities of the world. We have been doing everything we can to get to the unreached people groups of the world, which takes us to last frontier, in a lot of cases more rural, these more hard to reach places, and that's okay. This is not a call to stop that. This is a call to balance that with city focuses, to take cities of the world and focus on reaching the cities. And the 21st century has been dubbed by many sociologists as the urban century. Just to throw some quick stats your way, in the year 1800, the world was 3% urban. In other words, in 1800, 3% of the world's population was living in cities, in urban centers of the world. By 1900, that number rose to 14%. 14% of the world's population was living in cities in 100 years, an increase from 3% to 14%. Today, 55% at least, maybe more, of the world's population lives in urban centers. The world is quickly, very rapidly becoming more urban, and these stats all come from the World Health Organization, the United Nations. By 2050, it is projected that 66%, at least 2/3 of the world's population, will be living in cities. 180,000 people worldwide are moving to cities every day. Just to give some perspective, perhaps, that is the equivalent of the population of Little Rock, Arkansas, moving to cities every day. It's a new Little Rock every day, so to speak. The twin engine to urbanization in this century is globalization. As the world becomes more urban, it's also becoming more global. In other words, the people of the world are becoming more connected to each other. Okay, people not only moving into the cities, they're moving from city to city to city to city around the world. Financial markets are based in major cities, and those major cities are connected. The financial markets, a stock market crash in New York City immediately affects that day and the next day the financial markets of the rest of the world, because we're in a globalized world today. Again, Tim Keller, whom I've quoted several times and recommend for a lot of missions reading. Tim Keller says that, for example, a person living in London will have more in common with a person living in Tokyo, because of city culture, global city culture, than a person living in New York City might have in common with a person living in, Coleman, Alabama. Okay? Because there are city cultures. There's this urban culture, global culture that exists in the cities that is now globalized. And so our missions in the 21st century must reflect this urbanization and globalization trend. Why cities? Well, why cities? Because of the sociological patterns we see today, urbanization, globalization. Why cities? Because it's biblical. Cities have been an important element in God's history, in God's biblical history. We read through the Bible, mankind was created and placed in a garden. The world started in a garden. We read in Revelation it ends in a city. But cities, from the garden to the New Jerusalem, cities play an integral part in God's history. Just take, for example, the book of Jonah, and God's command to Jonah to go to Nineveh to share the love of God with them. Nineveh was the largest city of that day, an evil empire, as we read and study about it. But it was the largest city that day, and God sent Jonah to that city. God had a heart for the people of that city to turn to Him. Sodom and Gomorrah, uh, Jerusalem, cities throughout the Bible played a very important role. Jesus' ministry, fast forward to the New Testament. Jesus' ministry. Now, in the Christian culture I grew up in, the Bible stories I grew up hearing, we kind of pictured Jesus being a rural Jesus, like he just kind of went from rural village to rural village to rural village, teaching and healing. But further study of the cities of that day show us that Jesus' ministry was much more urban than we think. Now, there weren't cities of 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, like 20 million like we see today. So we can't think quite like that. But for that day and time, Jesus operated in, through, and around town centers, urban centers of that day. We see him out on the hills feeding 5,000 people. We see him retreating up onto the mountain for solitude time. But his ministry of healing and teaching took place in and around urban centers of that day, those urban centers of Galilee. So it was Jesus' pattern. The church was birthed. If we look into Acts, the book of Acts, Acts 2, the church was birthed in the city. The church was birthed in Jerusalem. I mean, all the Jews of the world, God-fearing Jews from countries and cities all over the known world came to Jerusalem for Passover, to celebrate Passover. And it's no mistake, it's no coincidence that the day of Pentecost, the birth of the church, happened in Jerusalem on that day. Because we read that the people heard the gospel in their native tongue. Those people didn't stay in Jerusalem. They went back home. They believed and they went back to their cities of the world. Paul's strategy, if we study the book of Acts carefully, we see that Paul had an urban strategy. Now, Paul did not always go to the largest cities of his day, but he went to the more influential cities of his day. And one of the beauties of the Roman Empire of that day was the road system, the way the roads were interconnected, the way the cities were connected, and it was so that Roman armies, Roman soldiers could get from one city to the next very quickly if they had to. These were trade routes. These were the business trade routes, the crossroads of the world. And Paul went to these crossroads. He went to the crossroads cities of the world, evangelizing and planting churches. And we even see, for example, that there were people, business people, Lydia, for example, who dealt in fine purple linen. Okay, that's a successful businesswoman right there. We find her in the book of Acts in at least 2 different cities doing business, but also involved in Paul's ministry. She was a global businesswoman. And Paul took advantage of this. What we see in Revelation 21 is the New Jerusalem. We will be in the city for eternity, the New Jerusalem. Revelation 5 and Revelation 7 are the passages where we read about a remnant from every tribe, tongue, and nation gathered around the throne. So here's what we know. The unreached people groups of the world will have a remnant. They will be reached. They will be around the throne of God for eternity. So this is the way God's moving, and this is the way the church needs to be moving. And as people move into the cities and move from city to city around the world, our mission efforts must be in the cities. The unreached people groups that we have limited access to today are coming into the cities of the world, and we can meet them there, reach them there, train, equip them, and send them back out. The city must become more central to our mission strategies in the 21st century. I ask this question. Could it be that God is orchestrating today's trends for his Great Commission purposes? The United States has been very blessed. We have tremendous resources. We've had the gospel for several centuries. The church is blessed, but yet the world remains unreached today. And so as we continue to lag in our efforts, perhaps God is orchestrating these patterns of urbanization, globalization today for our purposes, for his purposes, that for our church mission purposes, we can get into those cities to reach them. To reach the world, we must reach the cities. 21st century missions will be in the cities. How will you as a missionary, will you consider going to one of the global cities of the world to reach the unreached? Will you as a church consider going to the cities of the world on mission? Will you as a pastor challenge your church members, your church people, to go to the cities of the world in their business? Many of them are already going to the cities of the world. We need to train them and equip them to be on mission for God, with God, as they go on their business trips to the cities of the world. Some of our people in our churches need to uproot themselves from where they are now and move around the world to the global cities and plant themselves there and become a part of a church planting strategy team as lay people, as businessmen and businesswomen. Students, instead of going down the road to the local university, the state university, choosing to go and study at universities in major cities of the world for the purposes of God. The opportunity is there. The opportunity is in the cities. And one of the beauties of the cities of the world is that English is the trade language. English is the common language in many, many cities of the world. Some of the largest cities in the world. So we don't even have to go through substantial language learning on the front end. We can go to these cities to work, to study, on holiday, as missionaries, as churches. We're going to these cities to minister. That's my challenge to you as pastors, church leaders, churches, as potential missionaries, as current missionaries, is to look at the cities of the world and to get on board with what God is doing in the world today. Thank you for listening in, watching in. Once again, I will see you online as we wrap up the course, as we are interacting through the final weekly questions. I hope that this course has been beneficial for you. I pray that it has. And if there's ever anything further to talk through about, please email me. I would be happy to walk with you or point you in a direction where you can get more information, more resources. God bless. Bye.